would just say stay curious. I would just say, yeah, stay curious, and use everything that you know, your passions, your interests. The more you get curious about how you can, whether improve the lives of other people through data, I think the rest will just come naturally.
Hey nerds, Monica here. Welcome to the Data Podcast for Nerds, where we get to talk to amazing professionals and ask them all about how they're using data to solve the world's problems. We're highlighting skills that data professionals use on a daily basis. Plus, we always include some fun bits because we're all nerds here and we love to have fun. So thank you for tuning in, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And as always, folks, happy learning. Today with us, we have Fabrice Joseph. How are you doing today, Fabrice?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Monica. Thanks for inviting me on my show. Looking forward to our chat today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So we typically start off our shows by understanding people's origin stories. So if you could please tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today in your data career.
For sure, yeah. So I'm originally from Mauritius. I basically grudgingly entered my data career studying accounting because that was one of the ways that I had found to in order to migrate to Australia, which I really really wanted to. So it already had a bit of a rough start, but I allowed through my university degree, and next minute, I found a graduate position in a coal seam gas company. Coal seam gas, long story short, this is just a different way of extracting gas if no one understands what it really is. Because the industry in Australia on the eastern seaboard was quite booming with the LNG industry, liquefied natural gas industry. So started my career there. Then get started into basically, started in tax, but then eventually found out what I really loved was doing management accounting. And so, for those who don't know what management accounting is, it's basically the accountant data analyst. It's all looking at business performance and trying to explain it. For example, one of the things I loved doing was, okay, well, we have this feasibility study for project X and Y. We're spending less money because back in those days it was all about let's try to spend as much money as possible, right? So it was like, okay, well, if you're spending less money, well, what's the reason? I had to go and talk to a project manager. I had to go to talk to a cost controller, and to basically come up with this narrative of to try to explain why this project which ended up spending less money. So that was the beginning of this data career, which I didn't really see it that way before. And all I wanted to do was build reports, right? I called it build reports, but that was like the basics of data engineering and like insights generation. So I kept finding ways to try to do it right, like outside of my, within my current role. But it was obviously not super, I wouldn't say it was not appreciated, but it wasn't really the thing that they would tap me on the shoulder for because as an accountant, you have your month end bread and butter. And basically, it's the same report and you tell vaguely more so, the same stories. Right? It doesn't really change. You're not, rewarded to like find amazing key insights, different ways of visualizing data. So it really started when I first found out about Cole's book, Storytelling with Data. So that was like a game changer for me.
Absolutely. I've actually never heard anyone refer to management accounting as data analytics for accounting.
Yeah. I mean, like I wouldn't describe it the same way, but like just like talking about it right now with you, I'm like, yeah, that's probably the best way you can describe it.
Interesting. So, what would you say are your favorite problems to solve using data?
Yeah, my favorite problems are it's quite there's so many different problems I love solving with data. My favorite ways of solving problems with data is basically through data engineering and data wrangling. For example, I just decided because just so many things, so I decided, okay, Fabrice, let's just pick one. Recently, what's been really interesting task I've been doing at work was I need to find a way to. There's this table, and we're talking about big data table, i.e., 45 plus billion rows kind of table. So it's very important that when you're dealing with that kind of big data, that when business users are trying to find questions to answers to the question, that is fast. One of the best ways of optimizing your table is by clustering and partitioning the table, which is basically different ways of organizing that table when it's stored in such a way where someone asks questions, the answer comes up quite fairly fast. I.e., the SQL engine in the background doesn't have to work as hard, right? So one of the ways I have to do to kind of solve this problem, and still in progress, hasn't been solved quite yet, is to analyze the query history. So whatever different queries that people have been, SQL queries people have been writing for the last 3 months, right? Like I have a million of them. And I had to say, okay, well, first I have to find out, well, I need to sample that, right? 10% sample, but I need to basically have a representative sample of the whole population, right? So there's different business units asking those questions. So I need to make sure that I'm getting 10% out of each. But that's one thing. And basically then building a bit of a SQL parser. There's different Python libraries that can do that to basically extract the where clause and then come up with the columns that people are using the most, and then using that to basically answer the question. But it's not quite easy because you're dealing with 100,000 rows. So where I got stuck and I had to pivot and do a project, but I'll circle back, is it's you get performance issues. I was running this code, and after like an hour, it was still running, so I stopped it. That's when you have to think of multi-processing, right? Running things in parallel, and using a virtual machine to do that job.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were analyzing all different kinds of SQL
Yeah.
queries. Were there things that you were looking at, like trying to get some kind of trend analysis going on, or you were just pulling out from the where statements?
One of those tasks was putting out the where statement, but I was also looking at um, the tables used into it. I was also compiling a whole bunch of queries because that analysis is part of a bigger thing. Long story short, it's kind of linked with one of the projects I'm working on. It's for conversational analytics project because one of the main things I'm doing at the moment is everything Gen AI. As you know, the whole world has been taken by Gen AI, so every business trying to find out how can we use it. So basically working on an NL2 SQL project. This is natural language to SQL. So I asked a question, what was the sales yesterday? Then the LLM slash the code is basically transforming that into a SQL, then runs the SQL on the database, then gives the person the SQL for their own knowledge and the answer as well, right? So one of the things you come up with is latency because you don't want people to like type a question and then wait for 10 minutes when they could have just typed the SQL themselves. But yeah.
What was the, I guess, most interesting thing you saw come out of the natural language to SQL query? Are there any like weird things that you need to know if you're trying that new tool out?
Yeah, the whole point is building the tool. You'll find like in the internet, it's been in the internet, in the history of conversational analytics, it goes way back to the old days of NLP, so natural language processing. So your typical just trying to find sense in natural language without the LLM world. So it goes way back, but the recurring problem is as I've mentioned before, I don't think I can't. Yeah, I did kind of mention that I've always been in the finance industry. So one of the things you come up with when you're dealing with financial data with a P&L, you have similar column names. For example, sales without tax versus sales with tax. Now, when you're typing, someone types a question, what sales? How do you resolve that ambiguity? So that's one of the things that you get is resolving the ambiguity, and that's the hard part.
Yeah, that would be. It's kind of like cleaning your data, right? or having a specific data catalog or data dictionary that you're able to refer to.
Yes, what was amazing is that I think it's every business struggle to come up with a data catalog. You as a data analyst, you come in and you expect it to be fully documented, which it isn't. But that exercise actually forcing the business to actually do the work. But even then, so even when you describe different types of columns, you'll do it for a human, not necessarily for the AI. So almost basically, you have to kind of add those roles. So if someone asking what sales yesterday, you say 90% of the time the person's actually asking for sales after tax, and then you basically have to tell the LLM if it includes sales for home brand products, things like that. Then you say, well, if it comes with this qualifying agent, then please use these extra tokens. So you kind of really have to teach it, but it's challenging when your tables has 300 columns.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I know that you have had a lot of really unique jobs before. And so I want to get into the fun bits and talk about those a little bit. Hey, nerd, are you looking for a career in data? I would absolutely love to help you out. I just launched a data career strategy program that helps folks break into data without breaking anything. I provided a link in the show notes if you want to learn more information about it. Now, back to the fun bits.
For sure. So yeah, I've had quite a bit of different experience, and just some context that came out of that frustration where I just couldn't find a way to kind of like go into that insights generation mode. Trying to find different ways of playing, investigating with data. So I kind of said, okay, well, I didn't really see how to inside of the data analytics world at that stage. All I knew is that there was this creative impulse. So I went out and said, okay, I'm done with this thing called accounting. I'm going to try other things, right? So one of the things I tried, two interesting things I did. One was being a hypnotherapist because I was always interested in personal growth, that kind of arena, trying to be your best potential this in sort of industry. So spent a year doing that, and also spent I think a yearish. So it's always conveniently been around a year because this one I think you realize it's not your thing. Seems to be the timeline. Then a t-shirt business, right? I had this amazing idea of creating my own t-shirt just because I couldn't find at the time. I think we mentioned that in our pre-chat, like clothing that resonated with me. We can unpack that a little bit more if you want.
Absolutely. So, what would you say is your most influential, unique job that you had that helped you in your data career?
Yeah, what I would say is initially I thought, well, I don't can't really think about how the hypnotherapist role really helped me, but then I thought actually, um, I always thought that at some point in time there was this shift in my level of confidence. I just didn't really know where it came from. I didn't quite mention that, but I used to be painfully shy, especially when I first came to Australia at the very least. Like it was hard to get a word out of me. It was the kind of person that people were saying, "Oh, you're like very chill. Fabrice is very chill." It was more like I was fuming inside, but I just didn't really express myself. I was not fuming inside, but like I wouldn't really express myself, right? In the way that I wanted to. So the hypnotherapist slash speaking, because I also did speaking, because that's how I would get clients, right? I had to basically come up with a talk about something like I don't know how to push through some obstacle, and then get clients that way. So that definitely pushed me out there. Had to do like cold calling, all this stuff that I hate doing. This definitely like boosted my level of confidence, and that's quite important when you need to um, in your data career talk to people and maybe sometimes say no, or sometimes swallowing your pride and say, oh, sorry, I was wrong, or doing all kinds of things. So really that those people skills really bring up to the surface once you have some base level of confidence where you're able to not judge yourself so much of the different things that like have ADHD. Sometimes things comes out of this mouth that I regret, but having that confidence to be able to forgive myself after I've done these things, or to just you know just let that go. So I would say that that was a main contributor to that. The other t-shirt business thing was there was two key things I'll mention. One was the asset organization. That was quite big. I learned a lot of how to basically, when you have an asset, even if it's like an Excel report on whatever topic it is, it was like, how do I have version controlling, naming my assets properly, way so that someone can look it up in a folder and can know exactly what these different assets are. So the naming convention. Um, so that was very critical to use it in a different context, right? I didn't have to, but in that case, I was told, okay, this is how you do things, and I just went along. As a grad, you just go along and do things, and you learn a lot of these things. And so that was one way to really find out for myself how critical it was, right? For example, the code that I used to label my black t-shirts versus my black navy t-shirts, right? They had different designs, and I needed to find a code for these designs. So when I went into a folder, I knew exactly how many t-shirts I have of this particular design, for example. So that was quite important. And the last thing I talked about, because it's really critical in the data analytics workflow role, is having this. You have a workflow, regardless of whether you're doing data engineering or just doing data visualization. It doesn't matter, or all of the above. There's some sort of workflow from step one, or from A to Z, and so how this workflow is organized for maximum flow is very critical, because I started with a workflow in my t-shirt business, and I was like, well, first there was no workflow. Then I realized, well, there has to be a workflow. I need to find a way how I can streamline when I first come up with an idea, like a logo design. Two, the last steps was when it was on Shopify, and it had the t-shirt design was in the section. It had the descriptions, because that allows me to really map what are the different steps are required. So that really taught me a lot of that workflow thinking that I still use today.
So, to kind of dig deeper into those skills, the skills that you built with your t-shirt business and your time as the hypnotherapist, what of those skills do you think were the most important to transition into your data career?
Yeah, it would probably a skill that I didn't quite mention before. I would probably say I know it's a little bit cliche, and they always talk about be curious, having curiosity, but I would say it is the mother of everything, of all. So I think everyone has curiosity. If you feel like you don't have, I think you do. All that I needed to do, at least, was to sort of tapping into my existing things that I was always curious about. For example, the t-shirt business started from a perspective that I went around, and there was this T-shirt, and like the best thing they could come up with was the logo, the name of a brand at the back, and I thought that was a little bit. I think more could be done there. So I was curious to see whether what else could be created, what else could be designed, for example. So same in my hypnotherapy business. It came out of even coming out of the accounting career. It coming out of there must be a different way for me to um, express that creativity that wasn't being fulfilled there. And I think that is a driver of everything. I mean, that's how what I would say. Also, that's what got me my started my career, because my first role in that data, like, well, you can say my first role in data was as an accountant, but my real data, to be more specific, was when I started at data school. So, but which is very hard to get into, and one of the ways that won me this, allowed me to go for entire process, was curiosity, and being curious in something that's something you're already interested in. And sometimes, interestingly, you find curiosity in places where you think you don't, like the Olympics. I have no interest in sport, But interestingly, I was quite interested in when I was given the Olympics data set. I find myself naturally asking questions. So if you feel that that's not exercised quite yet, I think it's quite easy. Find something that you're already interested in.
Yeah, that's a good advice right there. And I think with you specifically, the curiosity and the creativity go hand in hand and really helped you flourish throughout your career.
Yes, 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 absolutely, absolutely. I would just say follow that curiosity. Just yeah, it'll
Awesome.
always come up with something pretty amazing. And I would probably add also it was curiosity, but also like one of the reasons I picked data as well because I knew it was leveraging my existing skills. So I would say, can I do a bit of inventory on myself, like what I feel like uh, my previous career has taught me. But the curiosity, I think, even if you didn't have any other skills, you just were just curious. I think that's enough.
Definitely a great head start for sure. So, throughout your entire career, of course, you don't know everything, so you need to learn new things. And so, my question to you is how do you go about learning new things? Like, what are your go to
Yeah.
resources?
Okay. Cool. That's a really good question because I was initially lost when I first learned about all of this. Long story short, I did take some time off for a sabbatical because I need to attend to family matters. But one of the things I needed to do was find out about data analytics, so your core programming skills in SQL, and I was very confused because there's so much information out there. You have Udemy, you have Coursera, Kaggle, all kinds of stuff. I know. So it depends on your learning, like the way you learn, right? Your learning style. I knew, for me personally, I need something very structured. I can't just go on the internet and just say, oh, okay, I'm just going to go on w3schools.com, which is an amazing website, by the way, but it's totally unstructured. It just tells you basically different ways, different Python functions. This is amazing. I think it's a good reference guide, but I couldn't start there. I needed a structure. So I chose a website called Data Camp. There's also a different version called Data Quest. It basically has this track, has this data analytics track. I think I finished the whole thing. So I pushed through the whole thing. But it just gave me the core basic skills to know how to program, know how to code, and some basic data analytics skills like statistics and the way EDA and these different methods and framework that you need to have in order to have a successful start in data, right? So once I had that in mind, and then naturally I felt like I was itching for personal projects, right? So there's two ways you can go about it. It's very encouraged for you to go to like Kaggle. Kaggle is basically this website where you can find data and projects to play with. I never actually went there. I It's very hard for me to get naturally interested in something that is just given to me and I have no interest in. Like no interest in sports, like none. So that's a typical thing you'll get sometimes in a data science course, fortunately, because I think it's very male driven. So you get a lot of the typical sports things. Like, not really interested. So anyway, so I found things, very simple things like oh yeah, I built this little. It was back in the days of NLP, like this little chatbot. I learned this method, like this author called Byron Katie. It was very basic. What she does is like, you have a thought, and it's like, oh, and then it basically does the reverse of a thought. Like, okay, I am silly. What would you think? What would you be if you didn't have that thought? Something like that. It was very simple turnaround, and so I would build this basic chatbot like on Dash or yeah, I can't remember. Flask, it was Flask framework. On that, it was just very simple. So I would say find these little things you're naturally interested in. You're trying to track habit. Just build like small habit tracker in Python or maybe the command line.
Was that the only thing that you built was a chatbot, or what other things did you build?
One of the things I was most proud of because I guess it kind of used a lot of my Python skills was when I was ready to come back to Australia from my sabbatical because I spent my sabbatical in Mauritius while learning all these programming skills. So I built this. I need to track flights, right? Like to coming back, and I want to track the cheapest flights and when to fly. So I built this tracker that will alert me when prices will go down. And so what I had to do back then was basically now you can do that on Google. You don't have to build code for it. I was scraping some website and to get those details of a flight, and that would come up in a dashboard, like a Flask dashboard, and I was able to basically investigate when prices went down. It had the whole trend analysis. So basically, my first data analytics project. So that was really fun. So I did that. There's a lot of like a lot of mini ones, but that was like one of the main ones I think I had put on my GitHub. Oh yeah, I think I did one like an ancient history one. I can't remember. I think I mapped some empire. I can't remember because that's one of my interests as well. So I would say yeah, I'd use basically everything. It was either an interest or like in the case of the ancient history and the chatbot, and or something that was pressing and that I needed.
Good. I think those are two really good takeaways. Something that you're interested in or something that's going to really help you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it can get quite boring just doing that dry course and sitting down and just, testing yourself on questions that you're not really passionate about. The moment I got some basic understanding of how to code, I was basically spending most of the time doing the projects, and I had to actually force myself to finish the track. I didn't have to. I think I just wanted the certificate. I didn't have to, but I managed to force myself to do it. But I would say get some basics, and then the rest is history. You learn so much from. Then you can go on W3 schools and look up. Oh yeah, like how does that syntax work? Once you have some basics.
That makes sense. Well, do you have any final words of recommendations at all for the listeners out there?
Well, what I would say, I would just say stay curious. I would just say yeah, stay curious, and use everything that you know, your passions, your interests, and just find out more about that. I think I would just say yes. The more you get curious about how you can, whether improve your life, improve the lives of other people through data, I think the rest will just come naturally. You'll learn so much just online, like I'd say, just building your own projects. It'll just come together. It'll be as easy as just when you first learn how to speak when you're a child.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Fabrice, for coming on the show. If any of the listeners have any questions for you, where can they find and or follow you?
Yeah, my main place to go is LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a message. I'm quite open to. Some people have messaged me before, asking specific advice. I'm very open.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, Fabrice. And as always, folks, happy learning.